Okay, looks like we are live once again, Mark. Good evening from the other side of the globe and good morning from here. Beautiful Sunshine Coast. How are you today?
I'm excellent.
You're always excellent. Is there a time when you're not excellent?
I try not to. I keep reminding myself.
Any day
Choose the
above,
state you want to be in.
as they say, any day above ground is an excellent day. We were discussing the customer journey before we went live. And I've kind of put this out there as just a bit of a question time. I'll try and keep an eye on Facebook and see if any questions do come in. But customer journey is, or the customer journey is a big part of marketing and a big part of and going back to a couple of our older or our past videos, I'm big on the research and researching the customer journey, what point your customer is at and where you're at, and being able to meet that gap is a big part of marketing, big part of getting someone across the line. Can you give us maybe a bit of your spin on maybe enter the conversation there with, tell us what you think of the customer journey.
Well, when I look at
your description of the customer journey, maybe.
I think the key thing that I really focus on is the word customer. It's their journey. And their journey starts with awareness. And the awareness is the awareness that they have a problem, or that they have a need or a want that needs to be satisfied. And then there's the awareness of you as a solution. Do we know about you? And, moving beyond that awareness is essentially the interest of the customer saying, okay, I need to find out more about this. And it used to be that about 1/3 of the customer journey was in the hands of the customer. They would gather their information around newspapers or trade magazines or trade shows or just general consumer awareness, walking into a showroom of a dealer if they were looking for a car, or going to a retail store if they were looking for furniture, those kinds of things. So they would show up and do that research for themselves. They wanted to see what that item that was in the catalog actually looked like when it was in person. And as soon as they walked in at that point, now there was a point of engagement with the salesperson. And then the next 2/3 of the journey would consist of the salesman trying to pound you and follow up to convince you to buy their stuff. And today, thankfully, with the digital process, 85 to 90% of that customer journey and interest and awareness and attention is all happening before there's ever any direct contact with the provider. And that all that contact could even still be 100% online, automated, without ever knowing who that person is.
Yeah.
Even when it comes time for us to respond, via chat bot or live chat, we can have a conversation with a potential customer and never actually have a voice or a video or a face-to-face conversation with that person.
Yeah.
It all depends on how we present ourselves and how our values align, how the trust develops between us and them, to the point where they're willing to, transact value, which means get their wallet out and buy something from you.
Yeah,
that's the ultimate value transaction.
Even in my own circumstance, I know I've had actually quite a few people to be honest. It's not just one or two, but over the years, many people that have come to me, we've got into they finally booked a conversation with me. We've had a conversation, they've become a client. And early on when I ask, you know, like, I don't actually know you. Where did you hear about me? And they say things like, I've been following you for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And like, this is something that we don't really pay attention to, although we should be, is who are the people around the outside that are actually touching base with us, but they may not be a direct touch. It's not like they're walking into the store and saying hi to the salesman. They, excuse me, they may have just come across us on Facebook or Instagram or one of the social medias, and just started following us. And that's, I guess that's why we need, like, on that customer journey, we need to be talking to different people at different levels or different places on their journey. And we have to be aware of that. I've got a good friend, and we we're talking about before, Simon Lovell, that does a lot of work with this customer journey stuff, where he will timeline where the customer's at each stage until their desired result. And they might be, 2 weeks in, they might be 10 months in, or 3 years in. And he will timeline all of those different aspects so that he's talking to those different timelines or spaces in time. And that allows people to come in at various, for different opportunities, really, for different conversations.
What I have found to be particularly effective is to pretend I'm the customer and say, if I was the customer, what would I want to know at this point, at each stage, and deliver results in advance to that client at that phase. And the key to that is, and I hear this frequently, well, I'm going to give away everything that I'm selling. The answer is no, you're not. All you're doing is raising their level of awareness. You are completely competent. You understand the nuances and the connections and the things that really make a difference and the things that don't make a difference and the things that actually hurt you. And you can't give all of that experience in a video. But what you can do is you can bring up the issues that they have not considered on a cursory level, because there's so much noise out there, and the noise, it's saying the same thing all over and over and over. And so the value is to provide insight into the things that are not common.
Yeah, and this is the thing where a lot of people don't dive deep enough, is you have to do your customer research. You have to know the customer journey. You have to know not just the problems that they have, but the intricacies of that for that particular point on the journey. And you have to be able to explain that problem to them. Some of the people, regularly I will see people, whether it be posting on Facebook or something, they're just wanting to educate and educate and educate and educate. And the better approach is to understand a person's problem and explain the person's problem back to them at a greater depth. And if you can explain the person's problem back to them at a greater depth, then they're able to trust that you know that problem, and they're able to trust that you have an answer for that problem. And if you can do that at all of the different stages of a customer journey, you never really have to worry about having customers, to be honest, because it's natural attraction. We're naturally attracted to the people we believe have the answer, and that comes through an understanding through language.
It's funny that you would mention that, because as you're speaking about this, it's it's voicing back the problem to the prospect so that it validates for them what they're already thinking. They're already questioning this.
Yeah.
And the challenge on the customer journey is there's so much noise, and the noise is fake news. It's a lot of it is unvetted, it's old, it's not working. And depending on how persuasive and powerful the presenter is, if you're not experienced, you're easily swayed. So as an expert in your space, this is where providing clarity or clarification of the problem to the client so they can see that, the next step from clarification is simplicity.
The big mistake I see online is people going the other way and just wanting to educate. And this is essentially someone saying, I know everything, I know the way, do it my way, I'm the best, and I need to tell you because you don't know. And instead, if you flip that just a little bit, it's not even 180 degrees, maybe 45 degrees, and just come at them from their perspective and understanding the problem that they're dealing with and describing it and detailing it, it lands very differently versus just educating and just telling, because it's kind of like you're just telling someone versus sympathizing or being empathetic with their situation and understanding their situation. And I guess that's really it. It's the difference between telling and understanding.
And when I hear you say that, the first thing that comes to my mind when someone tells me the answer or is giving me, this illumination, it's like, I don't want to feel stupid.
Exactly.
And that's exactly how it comes off. Is it comes off as being condescending and arrogant, and and just, I know more than you do, that's why you should hire me.
And it's funny because in today's day and age where it's the information age, everyone thinks that they need to be an educator and they need to be telling people what to do versus understanding. Like if we didn't have any social media and we were, face to face, belly to belly, old school style, just meeting someone for the first time, you don't jump in their face and start telling them what their problem is. You listen to them first. That's why we have two ears, one mouth. But it seems that everyone has, more than enough. Well, maybe we should be cut off everyone's hand, just one of them, so they could only type half as much, and stop people from telling versus being able to listen. Even in and this is kind of, as I said, it's kind of a tricky situation because online we want to push information out. We want to, like, the tendency is to want to tell. And writing and doing video and other, the other formats, the other modalities, being able to put information out there, but essentially from an understanding point of view, is a very different way of communicating. And it's something that if it's a very highly valued skill that people don't really, I guess it comes naturally for some people, and for others it is like, may as well be talking to aliens. They're just not going to be able to do it, but it is highly valuable. And it comes from the research. I'm big on the research, even though I don't like doing it myself. At times you just have to, slow down and do the research. If you understand the customer, you can put across that understanding communication fairly easily. If you're just wanting to sell your product and just telling them, it does land very abruptly.
There's a famous scene in a movie from a few years ago, and it was a business situation where there was a very complex business problem that was taking place. And the scene was that these technical individuals had found this problem that was going to cost billions of dollars. And they called the board of directors together and the CEO at 2 o'clock in the morning to reveal this problem that was just going to happen at like 6 o'clock that morning.
Yep.
And the CEO stands up and, he's really annoyed. Obviously, it was 2:30 in the morning and he's there in a boardroom. And he said, this problem has been here with us for a while. We should have dealt with it weeks ago. But be that as it may, that's water under the bridge. I'd like to speak to the person that figured this out. Who is it? And this guy stands up and he said, now I'm not a very technical person, so speak to me as if I was a small child or a golden retriever. And, when it comes to simplicity and clarity, that is the summation of it right there, is speak to me as if I was a small child or a golden retriever. It's got to be that simple.
Yeah. And I mean, that's why they say in copywriting to speak to someone at a 4th grade level.
Yeah.
And, it's a big mistake. I see people trying to get fancy. And, they're trying to use big words to sound smarter than what they actually need to. Taking this back to the, that customer journey situation, can you recommend maybe a jumping off point, a starting point for someone, wanting to, it's all about getting more customers, but can you point to like a jumping off point to get more clarity around your customer's journey point?
Yes. So there's three ways of asking for information along that journey. If you ask why you're doing this, then it becomes very almost accusatory. Like, why are you doing this? And so the defensive nature goes up right away. Like, number one, isn't it obvious to you why I'm doing it? So you're casting doubt on your own ability to perceive the problem, or you're making the person feel insignificant because why would you want to be doing that? It's not important. So avoid why questions at all opportunity. Avoid them. Don't ask why. Rather, ask what or how. How did you end up here?
Yep.
What is it that you're looking for? Those are all kinds of questions that begin to pull the pieces out. You can ask when questions, like, when did you realize this? That's not accusatory. It's just gathering information.
Yeah.
And so as long as you're trying to gather information but not extract information, extracting is aggressive. And this is a big challenge that I see with marketers all the time, is they're very aggressive with their questions and the nature of their copy. It becomes adversarial. Like, why would I want to tell that to you? I don't know you and I don't trust you. So all of our initial questions should be trust building, and connection based before you ever even get into an analysis. We have a mutual friend, Kevin Nation, and one of Kevin's famous lines that I remember from one of the first times I met him was, if you were a doctor and you prescribed a medication or a path of treatment before you did a diagnosis, that's malpractice. So our role as a marketer is to diagnose the situation completely at the beginning. And if we look at it from the standpoint of diagnosis, think about it when you go to a new doctor for the first time, they have an intake form. And on that intake form, it's got your whole family history or your whole personal history of ailments that you have or have not had. Did your parents pass from this? How did your parents die? These different kinds of things. Do you have a history of cancer in your family? All of those kinds of things. They're kind of invasive, but the doctor needs to know where that's coming from.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing for us. What kinds of things do we need to know at the beginning of the conversation to establish our trust and to establish our understanding of the scope and the nature of the problem that the client is facing and how severe it is, without making them feel like buy my stuff. We're not
Yeah,
pitching. We're not pitching them.
it's very different to be asking, like you say, those what questions or how questions or even when questions, than, turning the tide and straight off as someone comes to you, telling them, here's what you need to do.
Oh,
It's, it's, it almost sounds silly to talk about it, to be honest. But there are so many people out there telling versus understanding, and understanding is a drawing towards, and the telling is a pushing away. And you know I don't spend a lot of time on Facebook these days, and I would have to say it's mainly because of this fact that there are very few people putting information out there from an understanding point of view. Everyone seems to be telling or yelling at me rather than listening or understanding and empathizing. I heard something the other day that empathy, there's been a big shift in empathy because of COVID. And I think that that's probably a good result out of the whole COVID disaster.
I agree.
The more empathy we can kind of show or bring into our conversation, the more it attracts people. And I've got close colleagues, a good friend of ours that is very good at this. And the engagement, I see his posts and that sort of thing, and the engagement goes through the roof because he's very good at talking from an understanding point of view versus a telling. He's not yelling at anyone or telling anyone anything. He's agreeing with, he's empathizing with, and he's understanding what's going on in the world, and communicating that point, which allows other people to open up and share more. So which he can gather data from, gather insights from, and allows him to then create a message that is more aligned, it's more attractive, it's more easily consumed. It's just a better message.
I think empathy is recognizing that we are coming from a position of our customer. We're focused on our customer. We're trying to understand our customer.
Yeah.
Help me understand. Repeat back what they said with, let me make sure that I'm understanding what you just said to me. Did I get this right?
Yeah.
That's empathy. And this is a absolutely perfect example of meeting your customer on their journey where they am. Empathy is the definition of meeting them on their journey.
Yeah. And this is probably I would have to say this is probably a boring topic, or a heavy topic as far as the work that you have to do. And yet people don't value it enough. It's like
Oh,
the research at the start of any project, researching your customer. No one likes to do it. I don't like to do it, but I know the value of it and I'm willing to spend the time on it. And people need to, they'll probably, like, seen, a few people drop in and drop out of the conversation here today. And I think it may be because it's quite a boring, almost heavy, hard work conversation. But if they understood the value of what we're talking about and the result from that value, if done correctly, they'd be listening a little bit more intently.
it's high impact. If you look at the time spent here, it's probably the highest impact that you can have. Because without connection, without that empathetic connection, your offer is not going to land. So no matter how good your offer is, if you're not connecting, it's not going to be heard. It's not going to be received.
Yeah.
And that connection is about establishing a shared value with your prospect. That shared value can happen on many levels. Those are called core value alignment.
Yeah.
And I know a company that I've worked with that increased their business by $32 million in 1 year by simply aligning their core values with their customers' core values. It was crazy simple, but it was brilliant.
Yeah.
And I've never seen anything with as high an impact with the least amount of effort as they went through to accomplish that.
Yeah. I mean, that, just that you mentioned that, like, I see that a lot. And I think everyone sees that a lot, but they don't notice the significance of what's actually happening. I think that happens, and especially, small business and that sort of thing, like we're involved in, even though those businesses are sometimes into the multi-million dollar, size, they're still small businesses, relatively speaking. And it's when those little alignments happen that big results begin. It's, again, it comes back to that customer research. It comes back to, knowing the customer journey. It comes back to empathy and understanding and just meeting people where they're at, versus telling people where they're at, telling people where they should be, telling people, like, I hear a lot of the motivational speakers and that sort of thing today. Like, there's a lot on YouTube, and it's very interesting that they're all telling us, essentially, they're telling us what we should be doing, right? But in that point, they're telling us we're wrong, we're broken.
Judgmental. It's a judgmental comment.
It is. It's very, and like, I've got some guys that I follow and I think that are pretty cool kind of guys, and they're pretty smart. They're obviously built big businesses, but they're yelling at you all the time saying, you're broken, this is wrong with you. And it's not inspiring. I switch off, because it's like, this isn't an understanding conversation. They're not meeting me where I'm at. Like, right at the moment, I'm looking for a mentor, and I'm out there kind of listening to different people to see who is going to essentially be understanding enough to take on my conversation. And, like, that's what everyone's doing. Everyone's searching for someone who's going to listen to me, who's going to understand where I'm at. And yet people are yelling at us, no, you're wrong, you're broken, this is, you should be doing this, you should be doing your morning routine. Like, no. It's my life. How are you going to meet me on my journey? It's very interesting at the moment. I'm hearing, as I said, hearing a lot of people just yelling instead of, yelling and telling instead of understanding.
So let's switch a little bit of the perspective on this and look at it from the value of your brand. If you look at the value of your brand, how is it that you want your brand positioned in the marketplace? How do you want to be positioned with your potential account?
Yeah.
And the value of trust and the value of that brand connection can be worth billions of dollars or nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm using as a perfect example here Apple and Apple products.
Yeah.
Are they the best products in the marketplace? Probably not.
Probably not.
But the way they position that brand, the way they talk to the market, the way they make the market feel comfortable around their product, whether you're a 5-year-old child or, an elderly adult or anybody in between, you can engage at whatever level you're comfortable with and get a good result.
Yeah.
So they're speaking to the life cycle of that product. It's a brand for life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
They,
brilliant. It's brilliant.
yeah. I want to say the simplicity of their messaging, but it's probably more that it's probably more than that. It's the subtlety of their messaging, not the simplicity, but the subtlety of how it lands shows that they understand, versus some of the other companies that are a much harsher, again, yelling, we have this, we have this, we have this, versus understanding where a person's kind of sitting, and talking to that space. It's like just shifting your messaging in that way, will create a big change, create a big change.
I'm drawn back to Simon Sinek's famous YouTube video from 2009, why people follow great leaders. And he uses Apple as an example. And he says in that people buy what, they don't buy what you do or how you do it. They buy why you do it.
Yeah.
And if you think about Apple, that's exactly what it is. You're buying why they do what they do. They make it elegant. They make it beautiful to look at, beautiful to hold, easy to use. They've taken all the friction out of it and they've added all of these multi-sensory touch experiences, sight, sound, feel, all of those sensory experiences to the overall engagement with that product. And they've done it over time. So it becomes timeless, something that you can count on through your lifetime journey with them.
Yeah.
And it's that business of why you do it. And their whole focus is to think differently about what you do. And for me, that's a big driver, is to think differently, because that's where you discover your unique opportunities, is when you look at the problem from different points of view. And this is where you discover that the customer, that you can provide additional enlightenment, which is clarification, to the customer who's seeking answers to these questions that they need around the product or the service. So it's all comes around full circle when you understand how the pieces and the parts fit together.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, yeah. The funny thing that, well, the thing that I really want to point out, and kind of why we want to talk about this customer journey thing today, is just to reiterate how important it is and the value behind it. I think we might wrap up now, Mark, but can you add anything just to close on around the value of understanding your customer's journey, even though it may seem very obvious?
I think when I engage with a customer, a client for the first time conversationally, whether by email or text or LinkedIn connection or Facebook or on the phone or face to face, however it is, when I'm actually in an active conversation with that prospect, my focus on that is to get them to tell me how they've arrived where they are. What is it that they're seeking?
Yeah.
And how can I help them to gain clarity around the questions that they're looking for?
I'll finish up with just reminding everyone that in that customer, like in the customer interaction, be that on Facebook or Instagram or wherever you're putting out content, instead of just putting out content, be careful. Instead of telling and yelling at people, come from an understanding point of view and explain their problems to them and go deeper and show them that you understand their problems. And that will draw more people to you wherever they are in their customer journey. And, as I was saying to a client just the other day, list out, 20, 30, 40, 50 of their problems, and then just pick one of those each day and go deep on that. And, get into their headspace, get into their mind around where they're at, how they wake up on the pillow in the morning and what they're thinking about on that problem. And then show them that you understand that. That will draw a lot more people to you versus yelling and telling them what they should be doing. And people pass that off as education, but no one wants to be educated. They want to be understood. We'll wrap it up there, Mark, and we will continue again next week, I am sure. Always good chatting.
Have a great week.
You too.